Welcome to today's Boss to Boss podcast. In our interviews, we feature great business people doing imaginative things in often unimaginative markets, usually from the world of B2B. Today's interview is with a marketer who's been at the vanguard of innovation in B2B since before terms like social media or MarTech even existed. A marketer who lectures worldwide on topics relating to CRM, lead generation, and marketing integration, and has shaped the strategies of many of the world's largest brands. That marketer is Shane Redding. Shane, thank you so much for joining us. The first question I want to ask, because this is something that is a bit of a bee in my bonnet generally, is we have a tendency, I believe, in the digital world to behave as if we've almost invented marketing as it is today. Now, from your perspective, how new do you believe the fundamental principles of data-driven marketing are in reality? Is this something that's emerged in the last 10 years?
No, absolutely not. It's actually something that makes me, and maybe this is because I'm getting old and grumpy, very cross, because I believe that the principles of excellent digital marketing lay back in good old data and database marketing, which was certainly evolving and around in the 1980s, which there you are. I have dated myself for everybody listening to this. So, no, principles, absolutely fundamentally still, if you are following best practice, the same. Testing, experimentation, the holy grail of a single customer view, and using data and digital channels brilliantly to create amazing personalized experiences.
A similar question in a sense. To what degree do you believe MarTech is currently sort of overhyped? And because again, personally, I feel there's, and I guess you would expect this is of us as marketers, but I feel like an awful lot of the, very often, for example, when things are described as incorporating robotics or incorporating artificial intelligence, actually the technology is very often quite rudimentary and may have been around for quite a long time, but it's the application that's new. But that might be an unfair generalization. I'd love to know what your perspective is on that. And if there was one area of MarTech that you're looking at and you felt it really had the potential to alter the way that marketing functions operate over the next few years, what might that be?
Gosh, I think that's three questions in one, Dan. So let's start with the is MarTech overhyped? I'd actually say perhaps MarTech is just brilliantly marketed. Some of the best marketers in B2B work for these vendors. And they have done the most fantastic job of creating categories, of creating things we didn't know we needed. And let's face it, most of us who are marketers, there's a slight part of our personality that likes the bright, shiny new. So we have only ourselves to blame, I think. Um, yeah, over 9,000 different applications in the MarTech landscape. We have so much choice. But I think it's really interesting the point you made about description. Banding around words like machine learning and artificial intelligence. Again, I'm a marketeer, or and be it I'm a data-driven marketeer, but I am not a scientist by background. But I'm lucky enough to work with proper scientists, and we're talking in some cases rocket scientists, and they get very cross with some of the liberties that we take in marketing and sales with adopting some of these language for our own ends. And they're not the proper scientific definition. So there's definitely a stretching of what really is underlying these technologies in some cases. And in fact, probably I'd go as far as saying in most cases. So it's definitely a question of buyer beware. What exactly are you getting from some of this tech? Last point I think you said, Dan, was actually where do I see what's the future? Where's the real hotspot in MarTech and what's happening now? It's all about integration. I mean, I'm lucky enough to moderate and speak at conferences around the world, and there's this consistent theme, particularly in B2B marketing, but wider than that, about actually we need to integrate our data, we need to integrate our systems, and it's a category that is probably one of the hottest. There's starting to be some market leaders here, so watch that space.
No, that's really interesting. Really interesting. Whether it's that particular form of MarTech or other kind of transformations that marketing functions need to work through, there is often a prevailing rationale that companies, before they adopt these new technologies or the way in which they use those technologies, they first of all need to kind of go back a step and challenge the underlying systems and processes, kind of at the most basic. But with a constant, seemingly never ending flow of new technology, how do companies avoid ending up in a perpetual state of kind of never ending wholesale transformation?
I don't think they should avoid it. I think they'll be dead. Otherwise, I think we all need to constantly transform ourselves. And in fact, if anything, the last period of change has shown us that more than ever. And I passionately believe um, that we got to embrace transformation. We've got to look at better ways of doing things the whole time. But I think there's two ways down of actually doing that. I think there's the sort of always on, if you like, team sky approach, looking for 1% improvements everywhere. If everybody in an organization can make a zero point 0.5 or a 1% of difference, that adds up to huge amount of change. I think the days of big transformational cultures, there's still some companies that are doing it. It's a bit old fashioned because by the time you get there, the future's not the same. Oh boy, we know that now. So perhaps big bang transformation is not the way to go, but this agile, iterative, looking for better ways of fixing things that aren't working internally, and absolutely looking for better ways of helping your customers buy is really important.
Absolutely. A slightly different topic now, but related, I think. So, we've seen the productization and digitization of B2B propositions at particularly at low price points, but less so at kind of higher price points. Is that because high value items simply can't be sold without a strong human dimension, or are there other barriers preventing that transition?
I believe there's fundamental embedded cultural barriers to change, to moving towards particularly e-commerce for B2B. And I think that's the biggest one is traditional legacy company organization where the power base, if you like, lies with sales. The sales director is on the board, but maybe the ops director or the marketing director isn't. And I think, it's a hard thing to change because you're actually asking somebody to divert their budget and instead of the traditional we need more people, actually we need less people but better ways of doing things. Massive change also in terms of the customers and what they want. And I think some businesses have been slow to hear that. So this, if you like, this embedded, this is the way we've always done it, but a lack of understanding that the buyer has changed. But I think we also have to be very honest with ourselves and reflect that often in our organizations, maybe we lack the skills to do this. It's scary. This is an absolute organizational change, but we can do it now and we can do it in a very, if you like, low risk way. We can test, we can go in and we can just take one area and try it and expand out. Um, I think there's lots of reasons that are meaning that we've been a little slow to this. But on the other side, I'm super excited because I think the emergence of some other trends that we haven't talked about, Dan, and that is particularly this convergence of B2B and B2C, where we're no longer sort of talking about separate worlds, but the best of both are bleeding together. And that includes e-commerce and learnings from e-commerce. I think it also, the world of no code, low code, means you can set up experimentation without having to, do massive IT projects. I had one small startup, they got international payments set up on their website for cybersecurity in 3 days. That's what we have to recognize. Those are the brand challengers are doing it and they're doing it now. And the last, which is super exciting and I think really does help us move in this direction, is the emergence of a really strong marketing operations function. that can really define what an excellent digital sales process is.
So, taking the example of e-commerce, because that's all really, really interesting. But I guess within the digital space, as things become kind of infinitely scalable and more efficient than we've ever been able to kind of sell stuff in the past, there can almost be an elimination of meaning from that. And is there a danger that if companies try to excessively digitize or exclusively digitize their proposition and you remove that human element, that you actually kind of fundamentally undermine the customer experience, because the customer knows that this thing is super cheap to be produced and therefore they don't necessarily attach the same significance to it. I guess the counter argument would be there are no shortage of consumer brands. I mean, Apple, you don't necessarily need to go into the Apple shop to be convinced to spend thousands of pounds on Apple products. So I guess there are lots of examples in the consumer space that would work against that. But do you think that's maybe at least a kind of perceived barrier why companies believe that if they were to shift their offering entirely to digital, they might eliminate some of that perceived meaning?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, is anybody shifting today to a completely 100% digital? No. Um, but what I think actually it means is that you can do the digital stuff to actually create better personalized experience than actually a human could do. And this goes back to, again, this challenge of having a single view of the customer, which if you've got a customer data platform, you genuinely know everything about that individual that is visiting you online, their account, their company, to give them the best experience. If you're, maybe haven't got that and you're working in a call center and you're just seeing that one touch point, they can't give as good as personalized experience. They're just seeing their siloed view. So I think it's about getting that message out about using the best of both. And I think you mentioned it brilliantly, Danny, that the scalability, all the money is pouring in from VCs into businesses that can scale. It's like the holy grail of recurring revenues, particularly in B2B. But actually, the ones who are doing better are the ones who are also not just investing in that tech that allows that, but investing in the people to give amazing experience. And I think, that's really interesting. So the SaaS companies with a 3-box model on pricing that allow you, most psychology is most click the middle button, is then your onboarding experience is part digital, part human. There's that sales engineer who customizes the technology for you, who customizes it to your company, who gets a data alert on their dashboard to say no users have checked in for the last 30 days. That's a big flashing red light that if they're not using it, they'll probably cancel. So it's the two together, where those are the ones that are really, I think, absolutely accelerating away.
That's awesome. Shane, thank you so much for this. It's been fantastic, and I feel like you've certainly made me challenge a few of my preconceptions, which is always a good sign. So thank you. Really appreciate your time.